The Big Ten released their schedule this week, and so now we know when these matchups are going to take place. And here's what I wanted to do. Rather than go through the entire thing and you're going to get lost in the minutia, I want to give you the 5 most interesting games, best games of the Big Ten season for next year. Okay, so as we get into, man, it's going to be 2025. That just like when I say that, that just like that's shocking to me, but here we go. Top 5 most interesting games for 2025 in the Big Ten season. I'm going to go 5 to 1. I think you probably know what 1 is. It's always going to be 1, so that's going to be up there. But number 5 is a really good one. Early in the year, September 6th, and Michigan is going to go to Oklahoma. So here we're going to have a Michigan team that's going to have likely a new quarterback. They're going to have a lot of new faces. They've got all this hype of what has turned into an incredible offseason for Michigan off of the win against Ohio State. And now they're going to go and they're going to face Brent Venables and that defense at OU on the road. That's going to be a great one. So September 6th is the date that I'm circling. Michigan at Oklahoma. That is certainly one of the most interesting games of the Big Ten season. Number 4 is November 1st, Penn State at Ohio State. That's obviously going to be a fabulous game. And I think that I have some questions about what Penn State's roster is going to look like, how many guys are going to stay, how many guys are going to leave and actually go. They're in a great position in this playoff. They've got SMU at home. Then they would likely get Boise State. There's a really good path for them to at least the semifinals. By the way, Georgia has a quarterback that is banged up. If Georgia is able to get by a team like Notre Dame, Penn State's in a great position. What is their roster going to look like next year? Who knows? Who knows? So that game against Ohio State is going to be very interesting. There's no doubt. Number 3, in September, this one, the 27th, easily the toughest game for the Ducks on their schedule, Oregon at Penn State. Can't wait for that one. And Oregon is a team, and I'll get to some points prior to this. This is their toughest game of the year. We'll see what happens with their playoff run. This could be a defending national championship team under Dan Lanning, but I will say this. I don't know what Penn State's going to look like next year from a roster perspective. I have a good idea what Oregon's going to look like because their depth of recruiting over the last couple of years, their ability to get transfers, their ability to flip high-end recruits in the recruiting process has been excellent. And so Oregon's going to be a very good team. They travel to Penn State. They will go to Happy Valley on September 27th. Number 2, August 30th. This is going to be a great one. Texas at Ohio State. Absolutely. Give me that all day long. For the second straight year, Texas will come up to Big Ten country in September. Remember, this year we had them at Michigan. Now they're going to be going up to the shoe as they take on Ohio State. Who knows what Texas is able to do? Obviously, they didn't win the SEC. They don't have a bye, but they're going to host Clemson, and then they've got that tougher side of the bracket. We'll see who they end up playing as the process goes along. But this is a team that, like Oregon, I feel very strongly about moving forward because of the way Sark is recruited. Probably going to have Arch Manning as your quarterback, so that's going to be an incredible game at the shoe at Ohio State. And then number 1, November 29th, as always, the game. Ohio State at Michigan this time, as Michigan will go for 5 in a row against Ohio State, and Ryan Day and the Buckeyes look to stop the skid as Ohio State goes to Michigan on November 29th. Now, just some takeaways from the overall schedule. Those are the 5 most interesting games that I see on the Big Ten schedule, but just some takeaways. Number 1 is there's always going to be differences. This is not going to be an equitable thing as far as mega conferences and conference schedules. So who got the solid end of the draw? I've called it the schedule lottery. Who got the favorable side of the lottery? I think Oregon did. If you look at Oregon's schedule, it's favorable. They're at Penn State, yes, which is obviously a tough place to play. But that's the only game against the real top contenders from this last season. You know, they don't have Ohio State. They don't have Michigan. So you're looking at the favorable side of this draw. I think Oregon, right off the bat, you could think to yourself, I know their roster is going to be solid, and I know that their schedule is favorable. Oregon should be right back, at least in the Big Ten championship game. You know, if not in the Big Ten championship game, at worst, finishing 3rd, right around there. Like, I just don't see them falling off with this schedule and that roster. Oregon is here to stay. That's number 1. Number two, Ohio State, probably the opposite side of that coin. I think they got the more difficult side of the conference schedule. So they're going to have to play Texas, which is not a conference game, but then they've got Penn State and at Michigan. So they get a couple of those contenders, and those three games in general, we've talked about strength of schedule a lot over the last couple of weeks as we have gone into the playoff season, and we've seen how the committee valued or really didn't value schedules this last year. So this Ohio State team, which will have a ton of turnover after all of these older players go to the National Football League. It'll be very interesting to see how they can navigate next year's schedule, which I think is one of the more difficult ones in the conference. Speaking of a really difficult stretch for one of these conference teams, Wisconsin has an absolute brutal October. I do not love Wisconsin's schedule at all. It's very rough. Look at these 4 weeks in October. At Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, at Oregon. Woof. How we doing? Badgers? Do you want to? That ain't. Oh, hey, by the way, in September, you've got to go to Alabama. Slow clap for the Wisconsin schedule. It's like the Florida-Oklahoma schedule of 2025. We saw how difficult those schedules were, remember, this year? It's like the Purdue schedule of the big, like Purdue had the most ridiculous schedule this year of anybody. And that's what Wisconsin's going to have. At Alabama early in the year, and then their October is at Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, at Oregon. Okay. Good luck, Luke. Hey, Michigan's got some interesting games, in particular when you're starting to think about who's their quarterback. What is their offense going to look like? They did get news this week. They did hire a new offensive coordinator. Chip Lindsey is going to be their new offensive coordinator. Chip has been at North Carolina. He's kind of a spread power running Gus Malzahn style guy. And let's face it, Sharon Moore, he's going to dictate the style of this offense and the style of this team. He's going to want to, as he likes to put it, smash. Okay, so this is going to be a running offense. It will be an offense predicated on physicality. However, they've got to get better throwing the football, and you've got to incorporate some of those spread principles. You've got to incorporate some of the RPO, run pass option principles, and I think that Chip Lindsey will do that. He was with Drake May at North Carolina. They're going to have to throw it better. There's no doubt. He's 130th Michigan was in passing offense this last year, and now that new offense is going to have a bunch of really tough road games. They've got Ohio State at home, yes, but they've got to go to Oklahoma. They've got to go to Lincoln and face Nebraska. They've got to go out to LA and face USC, and they've got to go on the road to Michigan State in their rivalry game. That's not an easy schedule for Michigan, and they'll be doing it, navigating that with maybe a true freshman quarterback and Bryce Underwood and a brand new offensive coordinator trying to get his feet under him as it relates to Michigan. Last takeaway I would just say is, as much as we want to sit here and actually look at this and be like, what is that going to actually look like? We have no idea. Remember, it was just this August that we would have told you Indiana had an incredibly difficult schedule because they had last year's championship game participants in Washington and Michigan and Ohio State on their schedule. So we would have sat here and said like, oh, that's a really tough schedule for Curt Cignetti, the first-year head coach at Indiana. And it turned out that that was the only thing that knocked them all year was their schedule. So we don't know which teams are going to become much better, flip their roster, not flip their roster, go in the tank. Look at Florida State. They were a top 10 team to start the year. Bam. Done. Nothing. Indiana, we didn't think anything of them. Playoff. All right. Arizona State, you're picked to finish, I don't know, somewhere in the middle of a millionth in the Big 12. Where are you at now? The playoff. So we don't know. We don't know. As much as it's so fun to look at these schedules and say, like, who's got a difficult schedule and who doesn't have a difficult schedule, we have no idea, which kind of makes it great. Dawn of the golden age of college football. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.